Welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast, a show created to be your go-to source for straightforward retirement advice. Best of all, it is presented in a language that you can understand. Are you ready for some straight talk on retirement planning without all the fluff? Well, you found the right podcast. Here's your host, certified financial planner, Greg Gonzalez.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast. I'm Greg Gonzalez. Thanks for joining me today. On this week's episode, I wanted to talk about a topic that I think too many people don't put enough thought into. And this topic is on legacy planning or beneficiary planning. And I know some people that's end of life planning, where I want my assets to go once I'm no longer here. My purpose, I guess my goal of this episode is just to get you thinking of how this topic may apply to you, what your goals are. Ideally, at the end of the day, when we're 100 years old and we pass away in our sleep and we go to heaven, where does everything go? How does everything end up? And is everything seamless or not? And doing what I do for a living, I'm a retirement planner, certified financial planner. I have these tough discussions with clients, with prospective clients. And a lot of times these conversations can really get down to the heart of the matter, the heart of why we do so much of the planning. And I get to hear so many stories about people's family. I think it's just my nature, but I'm intrigued. I like hearing people's stories, their backgrounds. I like hearing about their family, their sons, their daughters, their brothers, their sisters, their moms, their dads, and how they want the planning to go. And then it's my job to, of course, make recommendations to make sure that their wishes are carried out as seamlessly and tax efficiently as possible. And of course, sometimes I have to ask some tough questions to people. And I'm going to share one story of not a yet client, but a podcast listener who's a prospective client, and how their plans had some really sizable gaps in their planning. And I would be remiss if I did not point these out and say, hey, I think this might be an area of concern, and let's talk about how we address this. So I wanted to talk about that on today's podcast. My hope is that you'll learn and get a lot out of this conversation, and it's not going to be overly complicated, right? My motto, my company tagline is retirement planning in a language that you can understand. I don't use fancy jargon. I don't talk over people's heads. The planning that we try to do and discuss on this podcast is in plain language, because you don't have to overcomplicate retirement planning. And Leonardo da Vinci once said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So we will make this easy. Retirement Made Easy podcast, that's the name for a reason. So before I get into today's discussion, I think you're going to really enjoy and kind of telling this story, and there's a lot to learn from it. But I just wanted to remind listeners, check out our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com, and you can ask your questions there. You can check out my free resources under the resource tab. And recently, you'll find the 2023 mid-year market outlook, that is. So you can download that right there on the website. Again, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. And for those people that are looking for help with retirement planning, you can sign up for a 30-minute retirement coaching call right there on the homepage. All right, let's jump into today's discussion about beneficiary planning and legacy planning. And this was a conversation I had recently with a podcast listener that's a prospective client. I remember distinctly in the first meeting with this couple, they said, wow, you asked some really good questions, some really probing questions that we haven't really thought about and really had time to talk about together. These are some great questions. And I said, well, the reason I ask these questions is if I don't, who will? And I hear so many people say, well, in our family, you don't talk about money. And I will combat that with, let's talk about the four-letter word, LOVE, and whether that's family, whether that's your faith, ministry, passions that you have, even if it's organizations you're involved in, whatever that may be, and really your legacy planning. At the end of the day, how do you want those goals to be fulfilled? This nice couple that I met, and I asked them if I could share their story on the podcast. They'll probably be listening too. They said, absolutely, just make sure it's anonymous, because they said in one meeting, you've helped us and gave us more to think about than anybody that we've ever talked to. And we've been working with a what they called a broker for over 20 years. But he had never spent the time to talk about this legacy planning and beneficiary planning and getting into really the heart of the matter. So let me paint the picture of this nice couple, both of their second marriages, and she had 2 daughters, he had 2 sons, and all 4 children were adult children, and they were financially independent. And a lot of the planning that they had done was when they were first married. They hadn't changed a whole lot of their beneficiary planning since then, and it had been years and years and years. And a lot of what they had done was based on the advice of an attorney who kind of talked over their head a lot. And the estate plan that he developed was, I guess I will say, hard to follow, and it was somewhat clever in a sense, but it really wasn't very forward-looking. It may have been a decent plan 18 years ago when they got married,